Hi everyone, welcome back into the Jansen Art Studio. Forgive my voice. I caught a cold 3 weeks ago, and for the first week it took away my voice completely. But for the last couple of weeks it's been really, really weak. But I've never felt bad. It's just been this cold that's going around and it's hitting different people different ways. For me, I lost my voice, so I haven't been able to film. And so thank you for bearing with us at the channel. I have so much stuff to catch up on, and just forgive my voice if it cracks a little bit or if it's a little bit weak. I'm trying to get back. Anyway, I got to get back to this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to paint. I've wanted to do another landscape with you. This is an Albert Debrensky painting, and I have really liked him, and I did a lot of study of him about 15 years ago. As a matter of fact, I did an entire online class on landscapes, and I painted one of his big ones, which is right there, which is about 2 feet by 3 feet. It's a lot larger painting. And he was a British painter, and he died in 1928, and he was known for doing painting a lot of Scotland and Wales and a lot of landscape, mostly landscapes, and he'd put the different cows and stuff like that in it. I'm going to use it for inspiration here for setting up this kind of landscape. In the class, I did a grisaille underpainting technique with him and really showed how to paint this one painting, which I really enjoyed. But this one here, I'm going to just use it for inspiration and do a little quick study of it. I'd like to bring back Debrensky and his son, Albert Debrensky Jr., who painted also a little bit different types of landscapes than what Debrensky did. But it would be fun to do those in some landscape studies again, using them for inspiration. So he has his cows and stuff coming down through here. I'm going to add a horse, a cowboy up here. You don't have to if you don't want to. Matter of fact, you could take the cows out if you want to. And overall, his painting is really, really warm. I think over time, it's been 100 years, I think the painting has probably yellowed slightly because he was an oil artist. And so I think there was probably a little bit more blue-gray up into the sky. So I'm going to add a few cooler notes to the painting as we get going. All right, let's get going and have some fun. First off, the board is here. It is, I believe, it's 12 inches, about 12 inches, almost 13 inches by 18 inches here. You can put it on any that you want, but I do like a landscape version. His is slightly taller. I'm going to make mine slightly wider so I can fit, so I sketched in this horseman here. Those of you that are members of the channel, I will put a drawing in the community page and a photo of my final one there as well. All right, for the colors, this is my standard palette. I did, because he's such a warm painter, I put out some medium white and some medium beige. These are two mixed colors in the Heritage line, and this is just black and white and a little yellow, and this is brown and white and a little bit of yellow, the burnt umber and white. This is my white, and the rest of the colors, all the colors will be listed in the video description below, along with links. And those of you that have not heard yet that we have a brand new site coming, we'll put links and stuff like that into the videos for our new community site too. Anyway, let's get into this. So I did my sketching here. I'm going to start with some of that real light background back here, which is what I like to do. And you can notice you got this high contrast right in here that just kind of pulls you into that painting right there. So we're going to establish some of that. I'm going to use as large a brushes and probably even my painting knife here as I can in some of these areas that I set them, but let's go right in there. I'm going to take some medium white and some white. I'm going to try to paint this mostly acrylic. I do have some open medium out. This is the open medium, and I do have some extender medium out to thin and manipulate the colors where I want. Matter of fact, maybe I'll just add a little bit of this to it. This thins the color, but keeps it wet for a little while longer. And so I'm going to start out with some warmth here, and then I'll lighten it up. I want to go almost to that 10 that he has there, and that looks very, very light, but it's about an 8 or so. So I want to go a little bit lighter back in here. And I'll probably, like I do in a lot of landscapes, I revisit the sky. So you'll see me come back in here again. But, and we could gray that slightly, which I'll do in just a second. Get some of this color on here. And so to gray it, what we'll do, we got the yellow. So we take a little bit of the blue and a little bit of the violet. We make a blue violet into that. And we add some of that into the medium white. The blue violet, medium white has yellow in it, so the blue violet here, it will make it gray. So it'll gray down the color. So let's add some color notes of this gray. We'll thin it slightly here. We'll add some color notes of that. That's pretty coloring up in there. I like, you know, it's like that heading almost into the evening here, and he's got these yellows and grays into the sky. And it's hard, these are just subtle changes here, which he has subtle changes in his sky. So it's hard for the camera to pick that up, but you can see him on the palette here. There we go, that's pretty good. Now let's get that light back up in there. A little more white. Right back up in there, nice receding light. And again, I'll revisit this again because acrylics dry darker. So you think you might have it, but then it dries darker. Let's move over to a little bit more blue into this gray. And if I really want to make it like this kind of gray here, it's a warmer blue gray, add a touch of that burnt sienna. Burnt sienna into this phthalo blue. This makes the most gorgeous grays. You see me use it a lot in rocks and all kinds of stuff. So, and that is that color that's over there, so that's good. I imagine in all of his painting here, he used a lot of burnt sienna. So we'll just add some of those notes in there. That's kind of neat. I want to take some of this around just a few areas of the sky as well. There. Let's deepen that up in that corner a bit more like he has. And again, I'll revisit this. I'm going to add this again. This is just our first look. Don't try not to do big long strokes like that. That puts too much of this mottled movement too far across. We want to keep it, the sky, very mottled. You can see his whole sky models there really well. Let's grab with some of that gray in our brush, some more white, and come right back here and establish that receding light, the evening light right over there. That'll be nice. And then he has these burnt sienna yellows, a little bit of violets and stuff into these clouds. And he does a lot of paintings, really beautiful ones, where clouds are flowing, because he paints up in Scotland and Wales and stuff. And the clouds are flowing over the top of the mountain and stuff. Really beautiful paintings. And he's quite an artist. I studied him a lot, like I said, and I really enjoyed recreating all kinds of his paintings. But let's take some of this. We'll thin it with a little bit of extender. We'll come in here, and let's get that just a touch warmer, a bit more burnt sienna and yellow here. Let's warm that just a bit more. That's better. That's more like that color. And we'll just put this reverse cloud in here like he has. Right in there. Small movements of the brush. This is a 3/4 inch fusion filbert, so it's a very soft one. You can you can capture some of his brush calligraphy here if you want. I sometimes do. Sometimes I just kind of do my thing. I just come close to it, and I'm going to put a little violet into some of this. I think right down in here. I think that'll be nice. A little bit of that up there. Maybe a little bit warmer at the top like he has. I don't like to, when I do painting studies of them, of course I emulate it and I copy it. On this one, I don't want to copy that much. I want to just use it for inspiration here. And I'm going to reset that light right down in there. That'll show up even more now. We get that nice evening light. Maybe a touch of this evening clouds right here. Here. Through like that. It's kind of pretty. his brush work is just amazing. And he painted a lot and displayed a lot at the Royal Academies over in London, and became quite famous for that. Beautiful painter. Lots of beautiful Victorian era landscape painters out there. Anyway, so that's kind of neat there. I'm going to put a warm note with some yellow and the white right up in here, kind of like what he has. That's sitting up there. Let's get just a little bit of texture with that and set up that warmer note. I like to use my fingers and stuff, but we'll drop some of that. He has this cloud kind of flowing down over this back mountain here. We'll do that. I'm going to do that. Now, let's just take some of our blue, our burnt sienna, and our violet here. I touched into a bit of that green. I didn't want that. I'm going to neutralize that with a touch of red. But I want that blue, and I want that violet here. And I want that burnt sienna, which helps neutralize that blue faster than anything. Then I'm going to lighten this all up to my background here. And we're going to sneak in, you can see it back here, the edge of a very back mountain back there. A little bit of brushwork so that it has some interest to it, some darks and lights, faded and lost edges there. So that one, you can see that right up in there. Let's come forward. As we come forward, we'll pick up a little bit of burnt sienna, a little yellow. Let's drop that right in here, right? Maybe just a bit of our violets and stuff here. I like to paint with a very dirty, model-y brush here, mottled, so that I get streaks and interest here. And I'm just going to kind of tap and follow the contours here as this goes down here, right like that. And I'll let the colors come off my brush, adding the different colors and contours to this hill here, back up in there. And a little bit darker, a little more blue, burnt sienna here, a little more blue here. And we can create some little bit. Now, you could use a smaller brush if you want in here. This would make it easier, but I'm just going to try to stay as large brush as possible to get some of those interest areas in there. And then we lighten up because of the atmosphere, or I like how Dustin Van Witchell calls it. He calls it the humidity. And I'm going to thin it just a bit. We'll lighten as we pull down here to set up, bring it here, the mountain, and it gets the humidity in the valleys here, so it gets lighter. Let's get a little lighter right down in here. You got to remember your acrylics are going to dry darker, so you may think you have it perfect here, and then it's going to dry a little darker. So, it's always good to have that lighter. Let's put that humidity a little bit more, a little bit of extender, a little lighter, right back into this little valley here, right out like that, right up that edge. That's pretty good. I'm going to reset just a little color back here. Take that up a little higher here for that back hill back there. A little more color, just a touch. There we go. About like that. Little, always in this little valley though, a little lightness so that you get that humidity in there. Okay, that's good. Let's get some of this. And you could use your knife. I'm painting a lot of landscapes. Just because you take the inspiration from this doesn't mean you can't change it. So you could do a lot of this back up in here with, your knife with the painting knife and get some fantastic effects. So light is actually coming back this way. So we're painting almost a backlit painting here. The light coming back through here. So here will be the shadow of a mountain, and it'll get a little warmer and lighter as you go across. So all we're going to be interested in is adding some of those different tones here. So I'm going to start out with this slightly darker, bluer, grayer, cooler tone right out here, and model my brush, and I'll go around my cowboy there a bit and go right through him, so I end up having to redraw him again. That'll be interesting. And so I'll take some more color, a little blue, maybe even a little bit of that red violet. I don't want to make it too dark because this is receding, right? So we'll add some marks of this color, which little angles, different angles and stuff here, which makes the the little valleys or the little cliff edges, the little ridges and stuff into the hills. Let's warm that slightly. Right over here, a bit of yellow, bit of burnt sienna. Here, we'll warm it slightly. Here, some medium white. Let's come right back down in here. That'll warm up. Puts a pretty good base in that we can manipulate and add some more tones to here. Right? And we'll use this and tap in like some other ridge lines here. Right up there. And maybe a little bit more of this shadow line here. Pulling down there. And just create that. I want that. See, he has this nice little, this like slope of it. It doesn't overpower anything. So I use my brush a little longer, create that slope there. And some of the shadows through there. Here. If you add just that little bit of extender, everything is staying wet here for a while. Let's get a little bit darker up in there. Catch that little edge that he has there. So it gets it's a little bit warmer. He has almost some of this blue color coming down into this little valley. So I might try to recreate that. I have a little bit of that bluish color left there, dirty on my palette. Right around my horse guy here. But like I said, I'll revisit this and we'll take another look at it in just a bit. Here. Love that kind of stuff. Just little taps, and you imagine you're looking at the shadow side of a ridge here. Makes it kind of fun. It's a really neat kind of a painting here. And you're just using inspiration. So I could get this. We're going to wait to see how that dries up there. So it's going to get a little darker, but I could, always put in a little bit more. Now, let's put in some contrast. And usually I do dive into the contrast pretty quickly, but I didn't today. Could be my cold. But we're going to take a bit more of that burnt sienna blue, a little bit of that violet, and let's come right in here and let's draw in that. I want it dark, a little contrasty, but some cool sides and some warm sides into it. I'm going to blur some of it too. I love that, one of the things is I love his stuff, and I've painted some really big ones like you saw. But I also love artists like Richard Smith and stuff who does, we've painted him before, who does the drawing in and blurring of the edges, I love that kind of look as well. And this is where you find like your own way through some of this stuff. So I'm a little warmer, he's a little bluer, but that's okay. And I'm going to just push this in here like this, okay, and model this up a bit. You get some of those cooler colors. But while that's still a little bit wet right there in that edge, I'm going to use some open medium. I'm going to come back up over here, which we had some of that little bit of lighter color, little burnt sienna, little yellows. here, touch of that blue to help gray that just a bit. A little bit of violet. We're going to make that light blue-gray here. Too much violet, Dave. That's going to be pretty close. I'm going to add some open medium here because I want this to be a little thicker. Now, those of you that have painted clouds with me, you know that whenever I do cloudscapes and stuff like that, it's thin color underneath, thicker color on top. So I've been using extender. I'll add some open medium, which is going to give me some body to this. And I'm going to use this just right up over the edge. And this is how he does that, to dribble this cloud kind of right over the edge here, which I love. So we'll push some of that cloud right up over here. And some of you saw some of the other paintings that we did here on the channel, the South Before Winter, and you wrote me comments that you really loved how the clouds, flow back up over the surface. Well, I got a lot of that look from Dabrowski and studying the years I did of Dabrowski. And was just really pretty. So anyway, so you can flow some clouds. That keeps that, that's a very soft application of it. I could do more, but that looks pretty good for me for this particular painting. I like it. Then I'm going to thin back down. Let's go back into some burnt sienna, some blue, a little bit of violet. Let's cool this down. Might even add, because he has just the tiniest bit of green starting to show up. And let's just model some of that through. Blur that out. I'm going to leave that little edge. I love how he leaves that edge. Maybe blur it ever so slightly. There. There, like that. So it just looks like it's going over a bit. And let's come down. Here, leave some angles for the slopes of this hill. Small mountain hill. Here. Right in there like that. Now he is more blue, so if you want more contrast, you can get some more like violet up in there. A little bit more blue, some violet, it's really quite a cool note up against the warmer of the sky. I'll add a bit more in there. Just a bit, just to say I did it there. And but I'm not a huge fan of it. I like it, but I like everything he does. But I'm not a huge fan of it. But we'll put that in there just so you see how to do it. You change it as you like it. It's your painting. There we go. But keep that brush kind of modeled and moving. That's what's giving you all of this interest in there, right? And what I did with Dabrowski before is I did a grisaille. I did value painting of it before underneath when I did Trout Rise. It's what the painting is called, Trout Rise. And I did a grisaille, and then I painted up on top of it. And quite an interesting technique. Very fun. Now let's warm that slightly. We'll put in the reverse ridge line here. Some of this right down through here. Some of that brush work. Notice I'm painting most of this with my 3/4. And you could use your knife. I've showed you how to use your knife. But I love all of this working of the tone. Let's go slightly green, some yellow, some burnt sienna, slightly green, a little bit of white, medium white, and some extender. Let's look at that tone. That's going to be pretty close. A little bit of green in there as it starts to show up. Here. I love that. Now, when you get these, you get these little brush marks that's there. That just shows you that your color's thin. And you can see that I'm using my color pretty thin because I'm adding the extender. I'm not adding the open medium. Notice how there was no thinness there into those clouds. Now, a lot of people would paint the clouds thin, but I paint these very positive, and so did he. It's called very direct. That's what its actually name is. You're painting very direct. Matter of fact, we might even add a little bit more of his brush mark in there. Right up and through here. And then just blur that out. See, my sky is still wet because I added that extender medium in there. So my sky is still wet here. A few little marks. Some of that color up in there. Yeah. Very pretty. Because that's the shadow side. Because the light's back here, right? So that's the shadow side. And he gets a real thin, like little shadow of some distant clouds and stuff way back there. So you put it in, grab some white, maybe a bit of the gray, soften that out here. Soften that out. There we go. Looks good. Let's not put that much of a line, but a little bit of that grayness back in there. That looks good. Right before we get to that. And I'm going to go here now, just pure white. I want that pure white contrast in there. There we go. Boy, that really, that really pops that contrast in there. If you don't like it, don't do it. But I'm going to go for it. Okay, so let's get down some more of this green, burnt siennas, yellows in here. A little bit of our darker tones in here. Let's get some of that flowing down through here. Right? Some of that flowing through some of these tones. See, I can just, and because my color's thin, I lift the pressure and just lightly go over that mountain there. And it'll pick that up here. And model the colors though. See, that's where you get this beauty in this, is that there's so many colors working on your brush. And which means you can't, when you're doing that, you're not going to be able to get an exact copy of his, painting. And neither do we want that. I'm using it for inspiration here. But I do want to show you some of this stuff because I really like Diarylide. I really like how he does some of his stuff. Let's get some burnt sienna into that. A little burnt sienna and blue, which is the good shadow here. And if I really, really want to do something to stand out, I use the open medium. But shadows and stuff, I like to use extender. That keeps them more transparent. So we'll add a little bit more of a shadow here, right in there. Watch that line a little bit. It's got to soften out. It's got to go lighter and soften out. So let's grab some medium white into that as we pull down into this little valley here. Right down in there like that. Here, like that. Has a couple of soft little ridge edges and stuff like that through there, so we'll add a few of those here, there, like that. So that comes forward a bit. A little bit of that light touching up here like he has. A bit more of that burnt sienna. Some of that back in here. Might be easier with a smaller brush, but I love the amount of mottled color that comes from this larger brush. I'm going to go more burnt sienna and blue here, creating this gray. It's going to come right down in here with some of these rocks, valley stuff here. And like I say, you could spend more time refining this, getting it closer to his look, but I'm inspired by it. I'm not going to copy it. Matter of fact, I'm going to start changing it up here as we get further forward in just a minute. So we'll add a few little light touches to that little edge there. And maybe even a little more dark, a little violet, blue, burnt sienna here. A little bit, a little whisper of that in that little valley, because that's a deep shadow here. A little bit of that in there. There, like that. We have this nice rock edge here. Just get a bit more burnt sienna in there. That shadow's a little, I don't like that, especially as you start to come forward. Of course, you need the dark shadows, but I don't always like them super cool. So the burnt sienna into those colors works really, really well because it allows you to get the dark, but it's not quite so cold here. Now, those of you if you want to start using your knife, you can use your knife for just really interesting additions. Let's put a little bit of lightness on the top of that rock right there. And you just push and slide that knife around and you'll get that interest, right? So we're looking right in there. And he's got a little edge right off there. We can bring that in a little bit more right there. I didn't want to do that quite so bright. So I'll just add a little dark and do that. Creates a little bit more of a rock, a little more interest what he has there, but you get the idea. And I can take some of these model colors. See, model this all up on your brush. This is what I like to do. So if I feel like I want to have a little more interest in something, I'll model some of those colors, and I can soften with the brush or soften with your movement here. Let's increase the burnt sienna in there just a touch right in here because he has it a bit. Here we go. If you drag through too much and you're pulling up too much of your background, that shows that your colors are thin. You just lift and lighten the pressure with your knife, and that'll take care of it. Let's add just a little bit more mottled interest right up and through, because that'll just look like little stuff going on, growing in there, right? Let's, I do love painting the knife, and he was not a knife painter. So we're changing it, but that's okay. This is where we can start doing it. He didn't add a cowboy. I am. So we're different, you know. Inspire. You know, so many people think they go out there and they have to create your own work. Yes, you do. But every artist over the centuries has inspired themselves. Like I have in my collection a Dutch master named Huygens, and he painted this Dutch master in 1850. So the painting he did that I have in my collection is from 1850. And he copied another Dutch master, but he was learning, and this was one of his early studies before he became a master. And so I always looked for that in my collections. I always looked for that because I love to get what those artists studied as they were learning. So I buy their early paintings. So we'll grab some of that. Let's add some yellows to that. Get a little bit lighter right back down in here. And just push that in. I love that. Let's get more of an edge. I'll pick up a little bit more on the edge, slide over on that, and I can draw that more of a ridgeline edge there if I wanted to. Let's go a little bit more yellow-green, some of our greens, some of our yellows in here. Let's toss some of that right out here like this into there. Blur that up. It's all these models of colors that we get that we're doing that makes the painting really nice. And of course the heritage that I'm using is completely non-toxic, so I don't worry about touching it. But if you ever have a fear of touching your colors and stuff, don't do it. Just use a brush. You know, especially like if you use oils or something like that. Don't touch them. Use a brush. We all know that. There we go. Let's put a little bit of light right on that edge. We'll bring out maybe that rock. It's a little lighter than what he has, but I kind of like it. So I'm going to kind of just drag that through like that edge. And I might go to a smaller brush here, and we'll take some of that burnt sienna and a little bit of blue. This is a number 8 Fusion Flat. And I might come in and just add that receding line there of that ridge, that edge. Tap and work a few slides here of that color down like that. That's kind of neat. Let's, so I like that. Let's define this edge a little bit more so this little rocky edge will come up forward a bit more. That looks good. We have some rock faces, shadows, so I'll go dark. Rock faces right up here that we're going to put in. Sometimes I just let that transparency that dark and the transparency come through, which I like. And this will be there's a little green, a little blue, a little burnt sienna into the edge there of the water. Here, I'm going to go back to my big brush. I feel the most comfort with the big brush because I can get the most colors into it. Let's get a little bit lighter here and pull that ridge, that line, right down to the water's edge there. Right like that. That looks pretty good. And of course this is going to dry darker. I've added just a little bit of open medium here. This is going to dry darker, so we do have to make sure we preserve some light. Let's go a little lighter yellow. A little bit more yellow into it. And get that little lighter, warmer right in there. And a little bit more, I think. Lighter, warmer yellow. Up about a value 7 or so. So it's really light, because it's going to dry down. There, like that. Yeah, might be, it's lighter than his. His has a little bit more yellow-orange into it. And, of course, some of that, guys, you have to remember, you're painting a painting or looking at a painting that's 100 years old. It's yellowed. And unless the museum has cleaned the varnish off and reset it, then you're looking through yellowed varnish. Let's put a little bit of that yellow back here to get that edge kind of right there. Nice little rocky edge. That's pretty neat. Let's drop a little bit of that right back into here. So you see that color, but it's not overwhelming anything. There we go. You just see it right back up in there a bit. Drag some of that off. That looks pretty good. Here. So you can see it's just, yeah, you can emulate that pretty close, And it takes time, some people always say, well, I can't do this. Like some of my students that I have now, I have a bunch of friends that have started painting. Really nice guys. And they say they've learned something that is so very important as the artist. They said, Dave, we really don't know how to mix color. You know how to mix color. Yeah, I've done it for 40 years. I've taught it. I came into this industry, not as an artist, but a chemist and a colorist, building paint systems. I know that stuff. And so their first realization is they need to take color theory to learn how to study those colors so they can look at something and learn how to make that color. And it's so true. It is so true. Yeah, so I'm going to come up here and if I add a little bit of the blue to this burnt sienna here, I will be able to make that gray again. See that little gray? And if I add just a touch more of that blue into here, not quite that much, Dave. We want a little bit more of the gray. We'll mix this all up. We'll get just that little bit of that lighter gray in here. A little bit more burnt sienna. There we go. Model that into the brush. We want this other kind of bluish gray coming forward into this rock. Now, I am going to do something when I do this, and when I'm painting rocks a different color. See, I'm just going to emulate this rock a lot. And a lot of what I do is I'll draw the rock, I'll put some lights on and stuff like this, but I'll draw the rock with my shadows. You've all seen me do that. I like to draw the rocks with the shadows more than anything else. So I'll put that on and get some of this lighter color, which is you're looking at kind of the tops. But most of this is going to be, because we're actually, as far as lighting goes, we're way down here out of the light of the painting because it's back up here. So we're into shadows. We're just going to have very little light here. And then I'll take my smaller brush here and we'll take some of that burnt sienna and blue here, maybe a bit of violet in it here. And I'm going to reset some of the shapes here of these rocks here. A little bit, pull down, a little bit of this here, kind of giving the feeling of these rocks here. There, like that, up here in the front. And I might take a bit of this light here. Just add some of that in here. So it feels like the rocks. And then I'll take some of that color and I like to tap it back into some of these other rocks so I get a harmony or a moving of color. So that color just doesn't show up in one place, which we call an isolated color. The color moves a little bit through the painting, and you see it that way. I'm going to bring this edge of this rock down this way, a little different than what he has, just because I want to. And it makes more like a different layer of rocks there. And I'm going to tone this one down just a bit, take away some of that light so it's not quite so bright. And I'm going to increase the light, use a little artistic license here. Increase the light more so than what he had right there, just a bit. Now, let's go back up. We'll grab that blue and yellow, burnt sienna, but I'm going to go real light. Let's take in some of that light right up in here. This is going to be the edge. I'll blur that edge off. The edge of our water here, right? And paint right up here by the cows. We'll add those, maybe paint into them a little bit. You know, if you're real worried, you got to be careful. The more white you add to your color, the more opaque the color becomes. So as you're painting around the cows, if you want to preserve your drawing, be very careful with it because you'll paint them right out. Let's add just a touch of blue to that. Get that warmth, that coolness of that sky in there as well. There. Which is kind of cool, which kind of neat here. A little bit of that here. A little more yellowish. Right up in here. I'm just going to drag some of this right through my cows. I know how to paint them. Now, what we're going to do is take these colors and reflect them down right back in there. I could be a little more white, so I'm going to wipe my brush and let's just pick up a little more warmer white. Lighter light. Here. Right in there. Especially up against this guy. Here. Isn't this fun? I just love this. But one of the things I love to do about this is I keep moving. That's why I love these quick paintings like this. Don't get me wrong, I totally enjoyed painting that long version of Debrinsky, but that took several days for me to paint that. And I love this way. I'm going to use my bigger brush again. We're going to come back. We're going to model up some greens, burnt siennas, yellows, touch of blues, touch of violet. Model all that up. We're looking for these kinds of colors again. Here. Right. Here. Add some extender to it. There's a cow in there. And there we go. We'll drop some of that right in here, which is going to be those colors. Right through that cow. We'll be adding him again as well. I just painted him out. Okay. So that looks pretty good. He has a little bit of more yellow green up in there, which is reflecting that. I probably should do that. Yellow green. Right up in here. Now what we do, usually I take my big soft brush, but, oh, here it is right here. I take a bigger, softer brush like this, and I just pull down, and that creates the reflection. Wipe the brush, pull down. Wipe the brush, pull down, pull down, pull down, and then across. And that creates the subtle movement there of that creates the water. Pull down first, and then creates the subtleness of it. Let's push. Then you got to put the reflection in. So let's take the burnt sienna and blue. First, we'll put that shoreline back up in here. Cover that in, a little bit of that. Drop it down a bit, right? And sometimes, you know, I'll cut that. You'll see artists will cut that light edge in there. I'm not going to do that this time. But I am going to add a little more blue so I get back over to that gray. And we're going to reflect these rocks. Here, paint the opposite so it paints like a triangle. Paint the opposite here. A little higher here. Right? A little higher there. And then a little bit of that softness of that ridge line and stuff right in there. Right through here. There we go. A little more gray. Here, let's add just a little bit of movement, and that's what starts your water. Now, you can have more colors going in there. What I like to do is I'm going to take some of this light, and I'm going to end up repainting all my cows, I think, because I kind of painted them all out. I'll add that in there. Just like that, give a little bit of that light that jets across the surface there. Right up by this cow. Jets across the surface there. Some of that coming forward there. That looks pretty neat. You could, you know, emulate those colors a little better. Drop some of that feeling of that darkness here. That feeling of that darkness right down in there. Let's just emulate that a bit. We'll push this other shoreline in there, but that'll capture some of that feeling. Let's go just a touch darker here. Generally, shadows and water reflections are slightly darker, but I think that will just capture it. And he emulates it more. He doesn't copy it like a pure reflection. I have some lessons of like the almost like fjords up in Alaska, the glacial bays, and where I paint pure reflections of it, which is really pretty because I spend a lot of time up there fishing and studying. And let's put a little more light right up. Maybe that edge just ever so lightly. And that'll be great, I think. His is a little bit more brown, a little more violety brown, so we can push just a bit of that in there, I think, till we get to that rock. Maybe add just a mark or two here to come a little closer to the emulation of that rock, shadows of that rock. What you do is you just kind of, okay, here's that darkness there, so I'll come down and I'll just add a little bit of that darkness there. And there's a little tiny trail of burnt sienna right there, so I'll just give a little bit of it right there. And that's how you start to get your reflections a little closer to each other, to what they are. If you want to do perfect reflections, I'm not going to go there. Now, let's put in, I want this to be kind of a sloping hill for my horseman here. So I'm going to push a little bit of yellows, some light colors here. And and I'm going to give kind of a grassy kind of look to it. And, you know, he gives some grasses, some bushes, stuff like that into it, and is a lot darker. But I'm going to touch this top of this with some more light, because I think light would actually, because I raised the size of this just a bit, and I think light would hit up there just a bit more. Here, let's just drop some of this edge here. This is going to come right down in here. We'll let that water and that edge kind of do its thing. Let's just take some thin stuff here and just kind of smear that around. That's all we need for that water right there. And we'll grab some dark burnt sienna, a little blue, a little green here. Let's just grab some of this. And I just used the brush here to break up some of this here. And yeah, some ridge line stuff. A lot of grasses we're going to have in here though, so I'm going to just loosely paint it here, get some movement, and then I'll come back in and refine it a little bit more. But we'll get some movement into it here. And here a little bit more, some light, some other colors. And let's come in with a little bit more light here. A little bit here. Make that edge so it advances up here a little bit darker. A little bit darker there. Okay. And a little bit more here. Whoa, that is too blue. That phthalo is so dang powerful. I'm just going to cut through that. Let some of that happen. Let some of that shadow, like this is just shadows and bushes and stuff, happening here. We'll build some more stuff in there, but mostly this will be in shadow because the light again is way back there, right? And let's just get some greens, some yellows, some lights, some burnt siennas, and let's just fill in some movement here. Just movement. This is what I do when I do quick paintings like this. I love it. Just brush movement, just the calligraphy of the brush, filling stuff in. And then you can come in, like take a little yellow and a little lighter color, and you can, like what he has right in there, you can cut a slope back into that, tap that around, loosen it up, but you can like give a little slope to the ground in there. And the knife really does it well because that knife gets that movement that's just incredible. And it'll make those nice little fractured edges there around like that. I just love how the knife does it. So I use it very flat and pull it down here. Here we go. And it just gives some of this look, you know, the bushes and looks like that, that it just kind of do it for it, you know. It's just, so let's put a little horizontal one here so it levels out a bit. There, like that. That's not bad. We could take even a little dark right in here to push, model that color up. Just like that. That looks pretty good. Pretty good. Okay. So I like everything there. I could use, you know, and this is what you're going to tell when you start getting done, do you, which we're not, we still have to paint the figures, but you've seen me do those before. I go quite quickly. But we can tap in like a little more light, some colors here to bring these rocks a little far forward, a little farther, a little more color. That's up to you. Tap some along the edges here. Add, now he's very yellow up there, but I'm going to change it. Add a little bit of blue into that. I like that. And let's grab just a bit. See this little kind of water edge here. See, it's coming back from up there, back behind up in there. So you can drag some of that around, and you can come back with just some thin out your shadows, and you know, if you want, add just some whispers of some other lines here, rock lines and stuff like that. A little bit of movement, you know, add some edges here. That's up to you. You know, how much you do. Like, he has like little touches of rocks and stuff all along in here, which do add quite a bit here to the painting. It's up to you. For little shadows, a few more little marks through here. A little bit more of an edge through there. A little more sketchy, a little more edge. It's all in there. Some of you may want to lighten up the whole thing, which you can, but you remember you are painting the back side, the cool sides of it. I have this feeling that, oh, I need to really lighten up this landscape, but no, you wouldn't, because that isn't. But I'm going to lighten up like this is hitting some of this hill. That back light there is hitting some of that hill. Now, I'm going to take a small, I had it out here. Let's see if I can find it again. And just so that you can see where some of those colors are. See, I'm way compressed down in the lower part of the value scale. These value scales are available in the links below in the video description. Just go get it. But you can see on the yellow one here, I'm down in my 3s, 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s painting that. But right up here in the 10, and right up in here in that. So it's a lot of contrast, especially right there. Pulls your eye. Now, so I'm going to paint basically the shadow side of this guy, almost silhouette. So burnt sienna. I'll start out with some burnt sienna. This is my little number 2 Fusion Filbert here. So I'll kind of redraw him again here. And push this horse here out like that. A little bit of that leg down in here into his girth. I'm going to tap and move that color around so it gets a little bit of modeling. Let's add a bit of dark, just a few. That's a little too blue. So more burnt sienna, a little bit of dark here, because he's in shadow, right? Let's give him the horse here, the idea of a darker tail there, right like that. And mostly burnt sienna. Here, just silhouette. Just in silhouette. A little bit of dark, like if you're painting like a bay, like my mare had. A little dark mane and tail. Just in silhouette though. I might even take a little burnt sienna, little yellow, little light here, just for a bit of light and touch right along the rim here, edge of her face, a little bit, just to, because that's where the light would hit. It's really teeny and not too important, but what the heck, we'll do some. And then back into the body of the burnt sienna, maybe a touch of blue. Here, build that chest up, right down into the idea here of a other leg. There. A little bit of that light to the front, so we got a shadow, a little bit of modeling in there, that's good. But I love to do, especially with figures, you've seen me paint figures a lot, and I like to do I like to paint the light and dark of a figure. That's where I really concentrate on, just shadow and light of the figure, more than anything else. And again, I'm going to keep this guy very much in figure, but maybe a little bit of gray, darker gray up here for his shirt, and maybe it's a jacket. We don't know. He's teeny. It's hard to tell. And maybe slightly more blue. He's not wearing chaps. Maybe he has just some blue jeans on, a little bit of violet. And again, it's just suggestions. Don't get too wild and crazy, because if you try to, it's suggestions. So if you try to be too perfect, then it'll look like you're being too perfect and people will start judging it. Otherwise, just put in some simple shapes. Maybe a little simple light here, up along the front, right in there. Just the idea of a light that holds to where his hands would be, or something right up there, right? Let's just put in a tiny bit. I'm going to rinse that blue out because I want to have just the tiniest bit of flesh, which is simple flesh, is just burnt sienna and white. So we want a tiny bit of suggestion there. Maybe a tiny bit of suggestion onto his hands there. And what I generally do, because everything there is wet, and I need to just kind of come back and blur the edges on this figure, so take a little bit of water here, just kind of blur into him here, which will soften him all out. It's a great little technique. Maybe a bit of burnt sienna into that. The back top of that horse there. Yep. And a little bit of burnt sienna, maybe a touch of yellow into that saddle and stuff. Just give the ideas. There will be a saddle blanket there. You can maybe put a little bit lighter, just again, just the idea of a saddle blanket here. Nothing perfect. Blur it out there. Sometimes I put in little details like that with the knife, but you got to be careful because the knife will put a real ridged line in it. And sometimes you have to just work it back and forth to get rid of that. But I do like that modeling like that comes from, see how it's just a little bit of light. And I can just pull it down. And I get a little variation to it. I like it. Maybe a little bit here, just some of that movement. So it looks like something, but you don't know what. A little bit there for the horse's ear. See, it's very impressionistic that way. I'll just blur out here. See, I won't even attempt to make a stirrup. Maybe I will. Just a little bit of a line. There. Here we go. And now let's give him kind of a whitish hat. I like white hats. Those are the good guys. We'll give him kind of a whitish hat here. And make it lean back just a bit. Medium white, some of this dirty color here. Just an idea. There we go. And I might try to make that front line a little lighter. And I might do it with my knife here. The edge, the rim of the hat. Yeah, that's going to work, but I need it. If the color doesn't come off, it can be just a little bit looser or a little bit more on the knife. Just that idea of it. Let's pick up just that little bit. Right up into the front. Big white hat showing up there. But it's going to dry down. I think, I got a burnt sienna mark right up there. I should probably adjust. There we go. That looks kind of neat. You can do those little marks. There's figure painting. You can do those little marks. So we could take this like this is his shoulder. I'll lighten it up a little bit right there and give like a little idea of his shoulder. A little idea here of the front of his shirt. With that edge. The knife, learning how to do stuff with a knife is really nice. Really works. Let's just blur that just a bit. And let's go his face. His face here a little bit lighter. Let's just drop in a little bit right in there. Now for his eyes, I'm kidding. No eyes. Yeah. But we could take that. That's nice little color there. We could give that just like a little bit on his hands right there. So that's a pretty good little cowboy there. His hat is a little light. We could probably just reduce that down a bit. There we go. That's better. Yeah, I like that. Now, you can, it's really a lot of detail, but you can just drag this along right like that and give the idea of a rain, something around there. But it's, any more than that starts to get a little too much for him to try to do. Let's put this back muscle on here. And just leave that at that. Maybe a little bit of the darkness here for the horse's hooves. There, like that, so it's standing there. And we can take a little yellow and light and some of this big, and you can make just some ideas of some of the grasses here. Just a few grasses standing there. I like to do that stuff. Here. And you've seen me make prairie grasses all different kinds of ways. I like to show you guys all different kinds of ways. But that just gives a little bit of the prairie grasses there. And yeah, I like that. That could have a bit of the blue, a bit of the light right back behind that there to help it pop forward. And see, this is kind of dry here. Let me show you something. Because I'm painting it's been an hour and 10 minutes, that's all. So it's painting about an hour and 10 minutes. But if I add a little water to this, I'll reconstitute it. See how it reconstitutes it? If you're painting with the Heritage, you can do that for a couple of hours. If you have a color you really like, you can bring it back with a little bit of water on your palette for about an hour, for a couple of hours. Let's just bring some of that back. right in there. Bring that forward. That looks kind of neat. Okay. So now we got just a whole bunch of little cows, and basically they're just going to be a couple of values, mostly kind of a tan and gray, and I'm just going to, paint them here with just using, since I've gotten rid of them, I'll use my small brush here, and just a little bit of shape here. Turn that back up. And I like to kind of blur the edges as I go as well. Here. We'll blur the edges and stuff. And we go back up here to the higher rump. The rump is always a little bit higher than their head. And I got that horn just a little bit too thick there than what I want. So I can thin it out with a brush and a little bit of water. There, I can push that back in there. There we go. Got to remember this painting here that you're looking at, him painting, is 3 feet across. So these cows are like 4 or 5 inches. But in ours, it is dinky. He is dinky cow. Here. Here we go. And I'll straighten him up a little bit as we go. But this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to tap them in, paint them just like I did this one here, and get their shapes and stuff in. And then I'll come back and show you the last little final thing. So I'm just going to drop them all in here, the same thing that I've done. You've seen me do this before we take this too long, and then I'll come back. I'm going to go rest my voice too for a second. I feel like I'm losing it. And we'll come back and we'll keep going, okay? I'll see you in just a minute. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Okay, so I added that in, and I've just added just a couple of little highlights. You know, he might have a little bit more to help separate. Like if I wanted to lighten up this one, which would bring that other darker one a little farther forward, you can do that. But they're really kind of subtly in there, and I kind of like that. So, but some of the shadows, I like to do everything as much as I can with shadows. Use the shadows to draw their shapes and stuff here. So that one's turned kind of sideways there a bit, and bring the shadow in to the backside here. Backside of his head here. So only a little bit of him there gets a highlight. And they're about sized just about right for the horse there. So that's the other thing I looked at, is keep the scale pretty much. The cow's just a little bit smaller than the body of a horse. There's a little one sitting right here and stuff. So, just kind of just do your imagination. I even added a few back here because I think I see those in his. And it's like when I did Trout Rise, he put little sheep back up into the corners and stuff. Really kind of neat. But anyway, and then you can, clean up and do any lightning or anything that you want up here. I kind of like that. I kind of like him this sketchy in there. But like I said, it still has just been not even an hour and a half here. And you see how I can pull some water and pull through that. So I'll be a little careful here and reconstitute some of this violet and stuff in here as I come to touch in, add a few other little things there that will push him forward, little marks, and keeps a fun little painting, I think. Let's get just a bit more of that light down through that valley there. And you can, now I've showed you in the past, other videos, like where I come back and I add the atmospherics. So if you want, you can come back and add some atmospherics and stuff like that in that. Just gets a nice, but not bad for a quick little painting, you know, under an hour and a half. Just a fun little painting here. And remember, you're painting the backside, so you can't paint a lot of detail. He pulls the viewer in through here. This is his path of light in through there, like that. So these are just there for you know, reference and stuff, thinking about it, you know. But if you want, you could put that path, you know, that atmosphere back through here, which would bring your horseman out just a little bit more. If you want to do that, that's all up to you. I might do that towards the end. I don't know. But it's good to get back to painting again with you guys. So sorry about my voice. Its strength is slowly coming back. I'm going to do some more. Over into our online classroom, I'm going to be adding a nocturne, which is a Western painting at night. And we're going to be doing a path of light with a glass vase with some roses. That's over in the online classes and stuff. We're going to be adding that this week, this coming on just Saturday, into the online classes. So those of you that are part of the Jansen Art and our online classes, look for those lessons and stuff coming through. So we have lots of stuff coming, and then I'll go back into my YouTubes. We have some more to add in here too for that, to keep you guys painting. Okay, thanks ever so much. Please leave a like down below if you like this video. If you want to see some more Dobransky, maybe some bigger ones and stuff, leave a comment. Tell me what it is, you know. And if you'd like to see that grisaille underpainting before you before we, you know, do the landscape, that's a different way. It's really fun as well. We can show you that as well. Okay, lots of stuff to paint. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.